And WB to building the dream. This episode is going to be pretty technical, so keep that in mind, because I have updated to 1.13. See that in top left? Ha! And I haven't gone through every single machine yet, but I have the basic, what is it called, function that where I do things figured out, and I want to walk you through some of the things that I've been doing and some of the things that I've learned so that you can update to 1.13 if you ever need to, or as a basic general tutorial on 1.13 mechanics. So the first thing that I noticed, here, let's go down here, is the flattening, which is blocks. They have changed the way that blocks are saved, and so you see they're in the gray. This is Minecraft:black_concrete. It used to be Minecraft:concrete with a data value of 15, but now every single block has its own name. So that has changed a lot of the way that my machines work, because you see all this black concrete everywhere. That's what I was using to be a placeholder for where a redstone block would be. But so it would work by making this repeating command block active. And so that's one thing that I had to change on everything, because all of these that are sitting underneath the black concrete pointing up into it, it sets the block above it to black concrete. So you set this to redstone block and then it immediately reverts back, and so you can just use it a lot of times without having to reset it. It resets itself. Monostable circuit, I think it's called. So that was the first thing. Another thing is NBT data. So items hold their own data, and you can see the names of these items and the lore that they have and the stats that they have. They hold on to that data, and blocks do as well. I think world blocks do in the sense of command blocks. This would be a block data. And so I had to change the way that some of the machines ran because this data has changed. You access the data by square brackets. Here's an example. So this, you see the @p with the square brackets? This is what we did before, but now everything is like this. So I can explain that later, what the command actually does. And so this command is a rename command. It renames an item that's on the ground near it. So I can walk you through what the data values look like for the changed, how it's changed in the new 1.13 update. And I will use this as an example. This one, Charge Dust. So you see it has a colored name and it has a colored lore. So the names actually use raw JSON objects, JavaScript object notation for their name, and it renders it correctly. You don't have to use the section symbol for the names anymore. You can just write it in, because previously I've had this cheat where this command block has a section symbol in it, and I've just carried that around and I used it for the color codes, but you don't need to do that for items anymore. And so this one, it's using the /data command, which is new. It's replaced entity data, and it has a bunch of options. The get option is really useful if you want to see what an item is named as, and this is the merge option, which merges the data that you have in the command with the data that is in the item or whatever you'd use for a selector. This is selecting on an entity, and it's selecting every entity but type equals item. And so this is the way of specifying that it's an item. Distance, this is something new. The .3 is everything up to 3. It's a range. The double dot is a range notifier. So you have to do this. Previously it was just the 3 and it'd do everything up to the 3. But this gives you more flexibility, because you could do this, where it's 3 and up and excluding everything closer than 3. Then sort equals nearest and limit equals 1. So the data command requires that you only have one entity that you're modifying, and so this limit option is very important in this case. Then this is the actual data tag, and you can get an example of this if you use the data get command. And so you're able to modify just the things that you want. And so in this case, it's a dropped item, and so this is its tag. It has another tag called tag, and then a display tag inside of that, and then the name. You see that is one quotation mark because the name is contained in quotes. But raw JSON also uses quotes. And so this is also a quotation mark, but this is called an escape character, so that the game knows you want a quotation mark here, but you don't want it to interfere with previous quotation marks. And so you're able to select this whole selector, or raw JSON, inside of those two quotes, and still use the quotes that are required in JSON notation. And so this gives a text and a color and sets italics to false because default is true if you rename something. And so this renames an item. And the lore tags are, here's an interesting thing. In this update 1.13, I don't know if they're planning on changing in 0.1, but the lore tags do not use JSON. And it's really interesting. So this item that I'm holding has a JSON title, but then a section symbol as the start of its lore. I presume that's a bug, but that's one thing that I wanted to talk about. And then next thing that I want to mention is data packs. So all of these functions that I'm running in your example, this one. This function is in the Awoken namespace, and it is titled Guardian Speak Get Charged Dust. I like using very descriptive names. And I had to reorganize this because the way that they've implemented data packs is better than the way that we used functions before. So the file itself, you'll see a screenshot right now, but the file itself has to follow some simple rules. They'll be in the wiki page, the actual rules on what characters you can use, but I would just recommend everything lowercase, and then the .mc function file extension, that also has to be lowercase. I had a problem with that where I tried uppercase to see if that would fix it, and it made it worse, it broke it. So make sure all of that is lowercase, and then you need to check every line in your function, because if just one line is broken, if it errors out, then the function won't load. It won't even show up in your function command here. It won't even show up in this list if one of the lines is broken. If the line fails, then it's fine, but if it errors, then it won't load. So that's something to keep in mind. And I want to show this. So if you remember in previous episodes, this was this huge block of commands, and I was running it basically copied commands with a few modifications for every single player that this is compatible with. And that has changed because of the execute command. And I want to talk about that for a second because it's amazing. So /execute gives you a whole bunch of options afterward. And these can actually be stacked. If you want to execute as a player, then it will run it as if it is them. But it will keep its own location unless you run or give the @ unless you use the @ part of this command, because then it will run it at a location and you can give it coordinates. I don't know why that's not working. But then what I really like is the if conditional. You can execute something if something else is true. So I use that in all sorts of things. All of my machines that have a redstone block area, a repeating command block, and then another one to shut it down after a conditional is met, these are all now using the execute command. Sorry, bad example. This one. Also bad example. This one. Never mind, that's broken. Here. Okay. This one has the repeating command block adding 1 to a scoreboard value because it's working as a timer. This one runs an execute command if a specific score in a specific scoreboard matches a range that I'm using here, and you can do tests on different values of different different names in different scoreboards and see how they match up, and you can do arithmetic on it, and it's really cool. But this one, I'm just matching a score. If this score matches 50 or up, because I want to be flexible, if you drop a tick, then I don't want this whole machine to just break. And then the run is another one in that list that I showed you at the beginning, because this is how you end the execute command. And this one just sets a block to black concrete, and so it shuts itself down. But because it was conditional, and all of these are conditional, actually conditional command blocks with this little second tick in it, center button, then the rest of the chain runs after it shuts itself down, but in the exact tick that it shuts itself down. And so I just run reset, and then what this specific machine is doing is setting a block, which is actually this block, which runs the full swap. Inventory switcher. And I want to show you what that is doing as well, because I mentioned before that it's been slimmed down a lot because of that execute command. I want to describe what I changed. So in swap inventories, which I'm showing on screen right now, your saved inventory gets swapped with a placeholder, in this case right here. So this is player 0. This is the saved inventory because these minecarts have been picking up and funneling items into this chest, and so it's been slowly loading into this chest. And it swaps it with up here because it needs a third part in order to do the switch. Then the next command is save inventories, which kills the player and drops all of their stuff in their own pod, and then it grabs all of those items and puts it inside of these minecart hopper minecarts, and it loads it into here. And so this needed to be an empty chest, so it copies this empty chest over to that area, and then it still has its inventory saved for you to receive it back. So what this does at the end of its cycle, its run, is to set this block, which is a timer. I think it's a while loop. While inv wait is less, no, yes, while inv wait is less than 120, run add 1, and then when that exits, then it runs this conditional, which shuts itself off. And then this is something fancy that I like doing, is having a chain that just breaks. And the first thing that this while loop ends up doing is fix the chain, and then the first thing the chain does is break the chain again. But you can imagine a wire having an electron going through it. The electron in this case just ends in nothing. But when the wire gets fixed, then this continues on, and the wire breaks itself behind it, but the electron is still moving through. And so what this one does is reset the inventory weight, and then run this function that copies over all of these saved inventories, one chest at a time, and then breaks it inside of the pod, so that all of your saved stuff gets thrown all over the place. And I've explained this in a previous episode, but I want to show you the new things that have been done, because in these functions, you notice that I put all of the players in a single function. That's one of the biggest things that got improved. I didn't have to have as many copies, and I was able to update this machine because I've had it around long enough that I'm comfortable with how it works and the concept behind it, and so I was able to actually make it better during this 1.13 update. And it fixes the player death because I had to kill them, and if people are keeping track of their deaths, then I don't want to break that. But then it starts this while loop, which does the same thing. It runs a scoreboard, and then it sets this to continue, and then it resets. And if the player had picked up any of those chests, I want to clear it from their inventory, and I'm using trap chest here because if the player ever has a chest actually in their inventory, I don't want to clear that, and it's not likely that they'll have a trapped chest in their inventory. But this, and so that just kind of skirts around the likelihood of them having a chest. And then these are conditionals. It's an execute command, and it checks the chapter, and then switches this direction of the chain command block to go up. And then it runs this if it's chapter 0, and it resets itself immediately to continue on for the next time this runs through. And for this one, it tests to see if it was chapter 1, and then it runs this pillar. And so what the pillar does first is fix itself so that future iterations are running smoothly. And then it starts a counter. Before actually ticking up the chapter number, I want to make sure everyone's settled. And then it sets a new spawn of players. Then it starts the machines of the next area. In this case of chapter 0 to 1, it starts these machines because now you are in the town, and I want to run all this stuff. And then it gives you the advancement that it's supposed to be the first one in the town. And then it moves the players to their new locations. And I have it running as a function because I set each of the players to have their own location in this case, the town, in the player's bedroom. But in the chapter 1 to 2 transition, then they're going into the impact section, and so I want them to have a different advancement, and I want to start different machines, and I want to set a different spawn. And so these first two are actually the same because it just resets itself and then starts the transition counter, which just adds 1 to the chapter variable. And then so in this case it does the first one in the impact section, and then it teleports them to the new location. So that was the inventory swapper, and I've been testing that, and I've got it working for each of the player numbers, ID values. It's currently only 8. This is player 7 because I start with player 0. It only holds 8 because that's all that I've made of these. There's only 8 holding tanks. And if I wanted to expand, then I could. I would just tessellate this upward, and there would instantly be 16 players total. But honestly, I've never seen anyone play a custom map with 8 people. I've never seen anyone play it with 5 people. So I think that's a good cap. If I need to raise it, I am totally able to. But next thing that I wanted to talk about is up at the top, up in spawn. Here, you remember I've talked previously about this machine. It has gotten an update, as you can see here. This is entirely disconnected because all of this is useless now. All of this is now done in these command blocks. So these two, I'll talk about those later. This one tests to see how many players there are, and if there's more than 8, then it just diverts the whole chain over to here to say that's the maximum amount of players. And I want to put in a, like how you have, sometimes there's links in chat, and I haven't quite figured out how that works, but I know that it's pretty simple, I just now haven't done it. and I want to give them an option, a clickable link, to turn them into spectator mode, because at this point there's a maximum amount of players and they're free to stick around if they want to. Yeah. But this is the magic. This one command block has basically replaced every single one of these, the entire chain. This command block, here let's go like this so we can just look at it. Execute as a player in a specific position, in this case up here. And the tag, I'm using player tags, execute as a person that does not have the player tag. And so if a player that has already stepped on these pressure plates comes back, it won't give them a new ID. And then execute as the closest player with a game mode that is not spectator. So if there is a spectator and they are hanging around that area and an actual player comes by, it won't set the spectator to be the actual new player. And then it has the distance equals ... 6 as a range of up to 6 in a radius around it. And the @p selector selects the nearest, and so I don't have to do the sort. But then it's running it as that person, and then I just run them a function. And this function, give player ID, showing it on screen now, runs this execute command, and it grabs the score of total players, which is in the scoreboard of math variables, and it directly inserts it as their own score in the saved inventory scoreboard. And so all I have to do after that is tick that total players up 1, and then that command will work again. And it gives each player that steps on there a new ID. And then it adds them a tag, and then it does the tick, and then it teleports them to their new location, which is in the tent. And then it sets their spawn point there, and then it runs the title to show them the chapter number, and then it gives them the advancement of that they're supposed to get there at that point. And so now this entire thing is not decrepit. What is it called when it's useless? Doesn't matter anymore. It's outmoded, and now it's gone. So I have updated these two on either side, where you change the difficulty and then you turn on the death counter or off. Oh, wait, I'll turn it on so I can show you right there. So let's move on to the next thing, which I've basically described all of the machines that I've updated. There actually aren't too many. I have spent a lot of time on building, but I just spent those. Those are the lessons that I've learned as I've updated this. The basic ones: the flattening, the NBT data update, the data packs, and the function command, the execute command, and then oh yeah, one other thing that I wrote down in my notes. The reason why I needed this template is because if you fill an area with chests, then it does them singular. Because you know how you can put chests down next to each other by crouching instead of just normal? If you use the fill command, it doesn't connect them at all. And so I had to have a double chest as a template in order to clone in a double chest, which I think is interesting. But yeah, the episode has gone long enough, and I want to get back to working. This is what I was made for. This is my favorite part about this game, the power that you have to change the world through these commands and the coding that you can do. Visual programming, that's what this is. This is a while loop. That I described that before. And so I'm going to end the episode here, and I thank you for watching. Oh, wrong button. And I'll see you next time.